the future of radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We are live today. It is Sunday, January 14th, 2018. And we are live tonight, Dr. King weekend also. We know Dr. King Day celebration is tomorrow, Monday, January 15th. It's been a very busy weekend. I did a 2-day lecture series at Nandi's Knowledge Cafe, the new Nandi's Knowledge Cafe, 71 Oakman Avenue in Highland Park, Michigan. So thanks to everybody that came out yesterday and today. Had a really good turnout both days. Today's presentation was African American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. That was the presentation today. And yesterday it was the distortion of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The revolutionary will not be televised on the television. Okay, so that was this weekend. Okay, yesterday and today. All right, so very, very busy weekend, and then I had to run home and then get ready to do the show tonight, do the show live. All right, so the call-in numbers, 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. And if you came to the presentation today, if you have a question or comment, you can give us a call also, 313-778-7800. Okay. All right. I have a lot to talk about. If you heard me Friday, I was here in the studios at 9:10 AM the Superstation. I was on the air 5.5 hours. Did 3 hours with Pastor David Bullock. And we did 2 hours with Bullock from his show, 9 AM to 11 AM. And then Steve Nevling was ill, couldn't come in. So Bullock and I did the hour of Steve Nevling's show. And then I was on Cliff Russell's show on Friday, 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. And then we know Spud was out of town, so the gentleman who was sitting in for Spud, he was running a little behind schedule, so stayed over. Cliff and I, we did an hour of Spud show. So I was here for a long time on Friday, but it was good. All right, so we have a lot to talk about tonight. You know, Friday we dealt with Donald Trump's comments. The Washington Post broke the story on Thursday, January 11th. They broke the story. Josh Dawsey posted the story, 7:31 p.m. I still have the original article. Trump attacks protections for immigrants from S-hole countries. All right, we're going to talk some about that, and there's been some updates to that story as well. You have senators like Senator Lindsey Graham, who came out and basically said that Trump did make those comments. Lindsey Graham was there. You have other senators, Republican senators like Tom Cotton, who says he doesn't recall. Okay, he doesn't recall those comments. And then you have Senator Perdue, who says he did not make those comments. Now, what's interesting is that when you look at the original reporting on this, and the media, like the Washington Post, contacted the White House did not push back on this and they didn't say, oh, he didn't make these comments, right? Because he did make these comments. This is who Trump is, okay? Get used to it. This is who Trump is, all right? So we'll talk about that. We're not going to spend 2 hours talking about that issue. I'm telling you right now. I got a lot of other stuff to talk about. We ain't spending 2 hours on that. But we'll discuss that. And then also, data shows that Nigerians are the most educated in the U.S. The Houston Chronicle has an article about this. Also, there's an article from Bloomberg as well dealing with highly educated African immigrants. But data shows Nigerians are the most educated in the U.S. and American Nigerians' education pursuit is above the rest, whether driven by immigration or family. Data show more earned degrees. More Nigerians earn degrees. Very interesting. Somebody needs to share this with the guy who sits in the Oval Office, right? Who's trying to pick a fight with Kim Jong-un. Okay? Somebody needs to share this with him. Okay? Somebody email us to the White House, right? Or if you know Pastor Darrell Scott, or if you know Pastor Mark Burns, who got eviscerated on Saturday on AM Joy and Reed on MSNBC, you know, because Trump has some of the dumbest people out here, some of the dumbest African Americans out here defending him, right? So we'll talk about that. Then also, Dr. King on Friday, on a Friday, Trump signs a proclamation recognizing the Dr. King Day holiday, right? That's on Monday, right? Which became a federal holiday in 1983. And at the signing, on Trump's right was Dr. Ben Carson, who sounded clueless. It sounded like he needed a nap. And on his left was the nephew of Dr. King, Isaac Newton Ferris Jr., who says he doesn't think Trump is a racist in the traditional sense. He just thinks Trump is, quote, racially ignorant and racially uninformed, end quote. Really? He's a 72-year-old racially uninformed person from New York. No, he's a white supremacist. Okay? See, I don't know, like, how much history Isaac Newton Ferris has studied, Jr., but, you know, he's not a racist in the traditional sense. Okay, he doesn't wear a hood, right? He doesn't wear a hood. He may not wear a swastika, but he defends those who do. And he's making policies that negatively impact African Americans and people of color. This is the same guy who wanted to ban Muslims. Didn't talk about banning crazy white men. Notice this. Trump didn't talk about banning crazy white men, but we do know that white American men are a bigger domestic terrorist threat than Muslim foreigners. I'm not talking about all white men. I'm talking about the crazy ones. White American men are a bigger domestic terrorist threat than Muslim foreigners. That's not me saying it. That's the statistics. Vox.com, VOX. Read it yourself. Read the article. White American men are a bigger domestic terrorist threat than Muslim foreigners. Why isn't Trump talking about this? They commit terrorist acts on Americans at an almost 2-to-1 ratio. Trump is not talking about banning crazy white men. Maybe because he wouldn't be able to get back into the country. So we'll discuss that. And then, you know, last week we talked about this crazy story out of Kansas. I think we talked about it last week. I'm not sure. We talked about so much last week. You have a Kansas Republican state lawmaker named Representative Steve Alford, who said, trying to defend why marijuana was not being decriminalized in the state of Kansas. He talked about how one of the reasons why marijuana was made illegal in the 1930s was because African Americans could not handle marijuana based upon their character makeup and based upon their genetics. This is what he said in front of a room of all white people. This is what he said. And what this shows is, this goes back to the study that we shared last week, and I talked about today in my presentation. You have the study from colorchange.org, and the article, and it's a joint study from colorchange.org, Color Change, and Family Story. Blavity.com has an article about this. The Washington Post has a really good article about this. New study finds news outlets promote false, negative portrayals of black families that don't match reality. And when you read these articles, and you read the study, they talk about how negative images, distorted images of African Americans will then cause policymakers to make laws based upon distorted images, based upon false information, based upon stereotypes. And here you have a lawmaker, Representative Steve Alford out of Kansas, who is justifying not decriminalizing and not legalizing marijuana based upon lies, based upon stereotypes about African Americans. Here you have a real life example of this. We'll talk about that. And then you have Michigan State University's in the news. Okay? Really good article from theroot.com about Michigan State University. Michigan State University receives almost $1.5 million to create an online slavery database. Okay, we'll talk about that. And then news1.com has a really good article about the education, the Department of Education. The Department of Education could soon open the school-to-prison pipeline on full blast. This is Betsy DeVos. This is clueless Betsy DeVos. I talked about it today, confirmed 51 to 50 in the U.S. Senate to become Secretary of Education. Only 50, there are only 100 U.S. senators. How was it 51 to 50? Because it was a 50-50 tie. And who cast the tie-breaking vote in the U.S. Senate if there's a tie? The Vice President. This is how Betsy DeVos got confirmed. Barely. Because she's totally unqualified. Totally unqualified to be Secretary of Education. I think she's unqualified to be a lunch lady in a public school. But she's Secretary of Education. You know, you understand the Department of Education is over the disbursement of student loans and Pell Grants, over the repayment of student loans and Pell Grants. You understand there's a civil rights department in the Department of Education that investigates the mistreatment of students of color and the disciplining of them and suspensions and things like this. And also the Department of Education also investigates sexual assaults on college campuses. The Department of Education does a lot. And you got an idiot who is the Secretary of Education. Secretary of Miseducation. I'm not even sure she actually graduated from college either. I'm not sure. I know Melania Trump did not. Melania Trump is a college dropout. Interesting. So we'll talk about that also. And then we have to deal with this date in African American history as well. Okay, so we have a lot to cover. Now on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. You can sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. Sign up for our email newsletter. Also go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can sign up for the email newsletter there. And also you can read the articles that I write. We have my DVD lectures there if you want to order those. We have audio podcasts of our shows, video clips, a connection to our YouTube channel. Everything's there. All right. Okay. So 313-778-7600 if you have a question or comment. So Thursday, 7:31 p.m., Washington Post breaks this story, and it's been dominating the news cycle since then. The name of the article from the Washington Post has been updated. Trump derides protections for immigrants from S-hole countries. And they actually spelled it out. This is the first time I heard this word being used on MSNBC. Joanne Reed and Lawrence O'Donnell and all of this. I'm like, wow. Okay. So here's what happened, in case you've been, I don't know, out of it for the past 72 hours or so. So Trump grew frustrated with lawmakers Thursday in the Oval Office when they discussed protecting immigrants from Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries as part of a bipartisan immigration deal, according to several people briefed on the meeting. Trump reportedly said, quote, "Why are we having all these people from S-hole countries come here?" End quote. Trump said, according to these people, referring to countries mentioned by the lawmakers: Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries, African nations. Trump then suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries such as Norway, whose prime minister he met with Wednesday, the day before. Trump, according to a White House official, also suggested he would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries because he felt they helped the United States economically. Really? Now, there's a whole history. Now, I did a Facebook Live broadcast and also put it on YouTube I did it Thursday night, Friday morning. And it's been viewed. You can check it out. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It connects you to our YouTube channel, Facebook channel. You could check that out. It's been viewed about 55,000 times on Facebook. Okay, because we have 1 million followers on our fan page. When you talk about Asians, right? Asian Americans and Asian Americans being looked at as the model, immigrant. Okay. There is a history behind that. Now, the Washington Post had 2 articles from November written by Jeff Guo. I guess it's pronounced Guo, G-U-O, right? The first article was entitled, let's pull this up here. First article was entitled, "The Real Secret to Asian Americans' Success Was Not Education." The real secret to Asian American success was not education. That was November 19th, 2016. The second article written by Jeff Guo was November 29th, 2016. It's called "The Real Reason the U.S. Became Less Racist Toward Asian Americans." So if you look at the article from the Washington Post, okay, it was updated January 12th, 2018. It originally came out Thursday, January 11th, posted at 7:31 p.m. And it looked at Trump's statements, and it said Trump, according to a White House official, also suggested he would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries because they help the United States economically. In addition, Trump singled out Haiti, telling lawmakers that immigrants from that country must be left out of any deal, these people said. So there's an antipathy and there's a hatred towards Haiti, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Haiti gained its independence from France through armed resistance, but they didn't just defeat the French. The Spanish and the British were allies of the French, right? The Spanish and the British were also allies of the French. This has led to Haiti's independence in 1804. The documentary 1804 from director Tariq Nasheed deals with this history extensively. If we look at this article from the Washington Post, "The Real Secret to Asian American Success Was Not Education," because once again, this deals with how stereotypes and misinformation put out by the media impacts policymakers, which then causes laws to be made based upon falsehoods and lies and stereotypes, and these policies based upon lies have real consequences and repercussions. So the article says, for those who doubt that racial resentment lingers in this nation, Asian Americans are a favorite talking point. The argument goes something like this: if quote-unquote white privilege is so oppressive, if the United States is so hostile towards its quote-unquote so-called minorities, why do census figures show that Asian Americans out-earn everyone else? Now, in the 2014 editorial, conservative commentator Bill O'Reilly, who's no longer on the Fox News network because ColorChange.org and other organizations took care of that and put pressure on 80 advertisers to withdraw their economic support of his TV show, The O'Reilly Factor, and Fox News fired him. They redistribute the pain through economic withdrawal. So in a 2014 editorial, conservative commentator Bill O'Reilly pointed out that Asian household incomes were 20% higher than white household incomes on average. Quote, "So, do we have an Asian privilege in America?" End quote, he asked. "Of course not," he said. The real reason that Asians are, quote, succeeding far more than African Americans and even more than white Americans, quote, is that, quote, their families are intact and education is paramount, end quote, he said. Now, this claim has been with us since at least the 1960s, when it served as a popular rejoinder to the challenges issued by the civil rights movement. Many newspapers printed flattering portraits of Asian Americans to cast skepticism on the people marching for economic and social justice. They said Asian Americans aren't protesting, they're not marching. Why are you out marching? Well, were you sicking dogs on Asian Americans? What's your history of lynching Asian Americans in this country? How were they barred from voting? Did they have to take literacy tests? Did they have to pay poll taxes so they couldn't vote? See, that's totally, they don't want to have that discussion. So the claim has been with us since at least the 1960s, right? So many newspapers printed flattering portraits of Asian Americans to cast skepticism on the people marching for economic and social justice. Quote, at a time when it is being proposed that hundreds of billions be spent to uplift the Negroes and other minorities, the nation's 300,000 Chinese Americans are moving ahead on their own, end quote, claimed a 1966 story in the U.S. News and World Report, which noted their strict discipline and traditional virtues. Well, Asians were not enslaved for 246 years in this country. They didn't have to deal with the Jim Crow laws. They didn't have to deal with the convict leasing system from 1865 to 1928. They didn't have to deal with decades of Jim Crow and redlining, okay, and things like this. We know from 1882 to 1964, you had 3,400 African Americans who were lynched in this country. How many Asians were lynched? I'm not saying none were lynched, but the overwhelming majority of people lynched in this country were African Americans. Okay, when you had the Confederate monuments that were built, the bulk of them built from 1895, the year before Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896 Supreme Court case, to 1915, second year of World War I, the year that the movie The Birth of a Nation came out, right? And then from 1955 to 1970 is the second spike in largest bulk of the Confederate monuments built. Who were the Confederate monuments built to terrorize? They weren't built to terrorize Asian Americans, because Asian Americans weren't the ones enslaved for 246 years in this country. Civil War wasn't fought because of Asian Americans. So even though with every ethnic group there are things that we can admire, that nobody else's history in this country is even close to African Americans, except for Native Americans. But we were African people were here even before Native Americans came into existence. So the article goes on to say, to the extent that all myths are rooted in truth, the model minority stereotype recognizes a real pattern of Asian upward mobility. Asian Americans were transformed into the model minority. A century ago, Asian Americans were known as laborers of the lowest wage. They were ditch diggers, launderers, okay, laundries, right? Like on Hop Sing on Bonanza, right? Hop Sing, the Chinese, I guess he was a house servant or something like that. Launderers, miners. Yet over the decades, they also worked on the railroads, right? Building the railroads. Yet over the decades, despite poverty, racial violence, and widespread discrimination, many Asians managed to clamber up the socio-economic ladder. Until now, the story of how that happened has been poorly understood. Quote, the widespread assumption is that Asian Americans came to the United States very disadvantaged, and they wound up advantaged through extraordinary investments in their children's education, end quote, says Brown University economist Nathaniel Hilger, Hilger, right? But that's not the case. We're coming up on the break. On the other side of the break, we're going to deal with the real story. We'll tie this into Trump's comments, and then said he would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries coming to this country because they help the United States economically. We'll deal with how Nigerians are the highest educated, and we'll also talk a little bit about the book, How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600. Hey, you listen to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. 910 AM Superstation, the future of radio. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation. Hey, the future of radio. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600. We'll go to the phone lines in just a minute, so hold the line, Dale. We'll come to you in just a minute here. So right before the break, we were talking about Donald Trump's comments on Thursday. I'm taking a little different approach to this. Number one, I'm citing directly from the article that broke the story, which is from the Washington Post. The article was written by Josh Dawsey I read the article within 15 minutes of it being posted. It was originally posted 7:31 p.m. January 11th. I was watching a live news coverage, and I did a podcast that night, Facebook on our Facebook fan page, and put it on our YouTube channel. And it's been viewed about 55,000 times since then. Okay, so the original article, because once again, the Washington Post broke this story. Trump derides protections for immigrants from S-hole countries. And they actually spell out the word. Interesting. Okay. So I was, we were talking about the article, and it was reported, according to a White House official, it was also suggested that Donald Trump would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries coming to the U.S. because they help the United States economically. So then I started talking about the history of how Asian Americans became the model minority in this country. Right? And I'm citing two articles from the Washington Post written by Jeff Guo, G-U-O. First one is from November 19, 2016. The real secret to Asian American success was not education. The second one, November 29, 2016. The real reasons the U.S. became less racist towards Asian Americans. Okay? So if we look at the first article very quickly, then we'll go to the phone lines here. If we pick this up, it talks about how at a time when it is being proposed that hundreds of billions of dollars be spent to uplift the Negroes and other minorities, the nation's 300,000 Chinese Americans are moving ahead on their own. This was the claim from a story in 1966 during the Civil Rights Movement in the publication the U.S. News and World Report, which noted Chinese Americans' strict discipline and traditional virtues. Okay, so this article goes on to talk, say, until now, the story of how that happened. How did Asian Americans become the model minority? A century ago, Asian Americans were known as laborers of the lowest wage, and ditch diggers, and miners, and launderers, and things like this. Yet over the decades, despite poverty, racial violence, and widespread discrimination, many Asians managed to climb up or clamber up the socioeconomic ladder. Okay, so Brown University economist Nathaniel Hilger, Hilger, said the widespread assumption is that Asian Americans came to the United States very disadvantaged, and they wound up advantaged through extraordinary investments in their children's education. But he said that's not really what happened. So Nathaniel Hilger, professor at Brown University, economist at Brown University, recently used old census records to trace the fortunes of white Americans, African Americans, and Asians who were born in California during the early to mid 20th century. He found that educational gains had little to do with how Asian Americans managed to close the wage gap with white Americans by the 1970s. Instead, his research suggests that society simply became less racist towards Asians. Asian Americans have been part of the United States for most of its history. The first major wave of immigrants came in the 1800s, when Chinese laborers flocked to California to help build railroads. Their presence soon stirred up resentments among white Americans. The Chinese Massacre of 1871, which took place in the streets of Los Angeles, counts among the largest lynchings in U.S. history. Okay, but overall, like I said, the majority of the people lynched in this country were African Americans. Now, in 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which shut down the door on the influx of low-skilled Chinese labor. It's also important to note that the first basically the first anti-drug laws in this country were in San Francisco in 1875, the anti-opium laws, because of the Chinese using opium. Now, opium was already used in this country by white people. As long as white people were using it, it was all right. when Chinese are using it, and Chinese men especially, the fear is, what will these Chinese men do when they're high on opium? Will they try to rape white women? Will they try to seduce white women and things like this, right? So then you have the anti-opium laws of 1875 in San Francisco. So by 1924, nearly all immigration from Asian nations was banned. Despite widespread discrimination, many families remained, settling mostly in California. Opinion surveys from that era show that whites expressed extreme prejudice against both Asian and African Americans. Okay? So this is in the 1920s, all right? By 1924, nearly all immigration from Asian nations was banned. Despite widespread discrimination, many families remained, settling mostly in California. Opinion surveys from that era show that whites express extreme prejudice towards both Asian and African Americans. Asians also lived in segregated neighborhoods and often sent their children to segregated schools. To survive, many Asians opened their own businesses because no one would employ them. But a lot of African Americans have businesses also because we dealt with discrimination as well. Now, we're coming largely from an agricultural basis, but you had a lot of African American owned banks, you have insurance companies, we have businesses also. But our businesses were targeted for destruction more so than other people's businesses. This is what the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts of 52 and 56 were all about. Now, Hilger's research focuses on native-born whites, blacks, and Asians to rule out the effects of subsequent immigration. In 1965, same year as the Voting Rights Act, right? Changing laws ushered in a surge of high-skilled, high-earning Asian workers who now account for most of the Asians living in the United States today. We're going to pick this up after we take this call. Dale, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for holding. Tell us where you're calling from.
Well, I have to tell you, the one statement that you made earlier in your program is that people of African descent were here in the Americas before even the alleged indigenous people of the Native Americans. Mm-hmm. When I heard you make that statement, I said, you're a person I need to listen to. And I have to say, you've unpacked a number of issues. But I just want to focus in on one. Is that
go ahead.
They like to state, or historians or white historians always like to state that they don't have a problem stating that a number of Indian treaties were broken.
Right.
Okay? But there were treaties that were made between people whose ancestry was in Africa that they broke as well. The one treaty was a treaty of, I believe it was a Treaty of Truth and Friendship. It was the first treaty.
Peace and Friendship, 1786.
I'm sorry. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And it was between the nation of Morocco mm-hmm. and the United States. And Morocco was the first country of the, quote, civilized world that recognized the United States as an entity. And as a result, by giving that recognition, the United States was able to do commerce amongst nations. Okay?
Right.
Now,
I'm familiar with that now. Just so you know, yeah. from my research and talking to Moors, El Morocco was here in this land. The continent, the country of Morocco was named after El Morocco. The country of Morocco that's in North Africa today didn't always have that name. El Morocco, from my understanding and talking to a number of Moors and Moors that teach the classes, El Morocco was actually here in this land. But go ahead.
Well, I agree. Mm-hmm. I mean, the pyramids that are located in what is now called Mexico mm-hmm. was built way before the pyramids in Egypt, and was built by Moors. You know, what
source are you citing for that information?
Well, I mean, I'll have to say this as far as the generalized source mm-hmm. are from Moors that have made clips on YouTube mm-hmm. and some images that I've seen, for example, of the Olmecs. And I had an anthropology class, and I brought up the subject of the Olmecs, and the instructor claimed that he heard of the Olmecs, but he didn't know anything about the Olmecs.
Yeah,
I had the pleasure
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. You had the pleasure of what?
Well, the thing is, in regards to breaking treaties, they've broken treaties with people of African descent. They have everybody believing that, quote, Native Americans were the first people living here, okay, and totally ignoring the fact that Africans had traveled back and forth across the Atlantic for not only hundreds but thousands of years. All in a jump, at least in my opinion, they don't want, quote, the black people of this country here to realize that, one, their ancestors were here and that the bulk of their ancestries did not come over from slave ships. That's the one thing they don't want. They don't want to let that secret out. And it used to be called the white Masonic secret because nations were running the country in terms of it being established. And the one thing, the main thing is status and nationality. You look in the Black's Law Dictionary and you see the definition of black. It'll denote absence of dark color, and then it'll go into what I call brands in terms of colored, Negro, black, African American. All right, but then you look at the definition of white, and they'll say something like absence of color, maybe purity, and then they'll start listing ethnicities, not only ethnicities, but groups that they start announcing nationalities.
Right.
Well, the Iberians. They'll be talking about mixed Jewish heritage, mixed Anglo-Saxon heritage, and so on and so forth. And then the one group that they also list in there is Moors.
Yeah.
The only group that has a significant amount of melanin in their skin that's listed in that category. So when Masons say that that they don't recognize color, and they put their hands out to show that, the gloves that they wear show that they don't recognize color.
Okay.
That may be true, but they do recognize status and nationality.
Right. Well, white is...
That's the one thing... Go ahead.
Yeah, white is also a status. So if you look at the U.S. Census Bureau, you can go to the 2010 U.S. Census form. You can go to census.gov, look at the 2010 U.S. Census form. And when it gives the racial classifications, and for white, it tells you that immigrants coming from northern African countries like Egypt, Morocco, things like this are classified as white. It also tells you that people coming from the Middle East, or people who we would call Arabs, people coming from the Middle East, it says they're classified as white. Okay? You have a case from 1978 here in Detroit of a man named Mustafa Hefni, who is Nubian. He's darker skinned. He's from Egypt, but he's of Nubian ancestry, or those that lived in Ta-Nehisi, which is what one of the original names of Nubia. Nubia is a Greek term. And he said when he went through immigration, they gave him his papers and they said, "You are white now," W-H-I-T-E. And he's like, "What are you talking about?" They said, "You are white now." And he spent all these years trying to be reclassified because he said, "I'm not white. I'm proud of my ancestry." And then you can go back and you can look at the petition of the Free Sundry Moors of 1790 in South Carolina, who wanted to get clarification and make sure if they had to be taken to court or something like that, to make sure that they were not held to the restrictions of the Negro Act of 1740 in South Carolina. Okay, that's the petition of the Free Sundry Moors of 1790, and that Negro Act of 1740 came about to put further restrictions on enslaved Africans because of the Stoner Rebellion that took place in 1739 in South Carolina, and this was used to further restrict their movements. Okay, so there is a valid argument made when you talk about white and black as quote-unquote status. Now there's something beyond status. There's identity. Black was usually largely adopted by African Americans coming out of the Black Power movement. There's an identity associated with that, but there's an argument to be made dealing with status, and there's court cases. There's a history to support that argument also. All right. I encourage you to read the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, by Dr. David Imhotep. Have you read that book yet?
No, I haven't read it, but I will go ahead and read it. But just to respond to what you're saying, I agree that there's an argument, but as I continue my study, and it's on my own at the time, it's putting me in the opinion that to call the names black, colored, Negro, or an African American, I call them brands because they don't denote nationality. There's no country called Negro, colored, African American, or black. But by being able to identify oneself as a Moor, and in the Moorish Constitution, it stated that one claims that they're Moor, it's up to another group to prove that he's not a Moor.
Now, which Moorish Constitution are you referring to? Because when I talk to people like Baba Ike, who teaches class, and Ishmael, who teach classes 6 p.m. Every Tuesday at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe at 71 Oakman Avenue, and these are brothers. See, Ishmael is Yamasi. He's part of the Yamasi Nation of Moors, and Baba Ike is, I think he's Washita. So when I talk to them, they'll tell you that Moor and Moorish are not the same thing. Now, which Moorish Constitution are you referring to? I'm very familiar with this information. Go ahead.
Well, to be honest with you, I cannot answer that question, but I can address when you say there is a difference between Moor and Moorish, because the Moorish, to my understanding, were the ones that remained in Spain after the Moor dynasty was kicked out, which I believe was in 1491.
1492, yeah, they lose control January 2nd, 1492, of their last stronghold, Grenada. Now, the other thing you have to understand is that when you add that ISH suffix, right, to make Moorish, that suffix ISH basically means similar to or like something. So so when you say Moorish, it could be not exactly like a Moor. It's similar to or like something. There's a difference. Because when I talk to the Moors of the Yamasi Nation, they say, no, we're Moors. We're not Moorish. We're Moors. There's a difference.
Okay.
All right. Okay, brother.
Thank you. I enjoy your show, and I'll make it a point to listen to it. What time does the show start?
9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. Okay, and visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, man. Take care. Thanks for calling. 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Also, I encourage everybody to read the book, Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. That's probably one of the best books on the Golden Age of the Moor during the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors that go into the Iberian Peninsula, which is today known as Spain and Portugal. In 711 A.D., it was called the Iberian Peninsula. And they go into Spain and Portugal, they go into Italy and Sicily and Crete, they go into France, they go into Holland, they go into England, Austria, Germany, they go all throughout Europe and change the course of history in Europe, which basically benefited Europeans and really didn't benefit Africans that much, but okay. Read that book. You have essays by Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay, who's one of the baddest scholars on the history of the Moors. Renoko Rashidi has an essay in there, Dr. John G. Jackson, Dr. Wayne Chandler. These are just some of a few of the people who have essays in that book, Golden Age of the Moor. All right, so let's go back quickly to this article here. This is from WashingtonPost.com. Now, this article deals with how Asian Americans became the model minority. Okay, and we started talking about Trump's comments, right? The S-hole comments, but this intersects into those comments because he said he would be a White House official, suggested that Trump would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries because they help the United States economically. Well, how did Asian Americans become the model minority? Okay, so Nathaniel Hilger, the economist from Brown University, his research focuses on native-born whites African Americans and Asians to rule out the effects of subsequent immigration. In 1965, changing laws ushered in a surge of high-skilled, high-earning Asian workers who now account for most of the Asians living in the United States today. But even before the arrival of those highly educated immigrants, the Asians already living in the United States had more or less closed the wage gap with whites. At the time of the 1940 census, Nathaniel Hilger found California-born Asian men earned less than California-born black men in the 1940 census. By the 1970 census, they were earning about the same as white men, and by the 1980 census, the native-born Asian men were out-earning white men. When we come back from the break, we're going to find out what happened. Okay, and then we'll continue with these other topics. We'll talk about, we'll continue to talk about Trump. We talk about Dr. King's nephew made a statement saying Trump isn't racist in the traditional sense. We'll talk about the Kansas Republican Representative Steve Alford, who said that African Americans can't handle marijuana because of their character and genetic makeup. And this is one of the reasons why marijuana was made illegal in the 1930s. Really? They're making policies based upon false information. 9:10 AM Superstation, the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep, the future of radio. We'll be back in the future. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 AM, the Superstation, the future of radio. Here we are in our second hour. Time goes by fast when you're having fun. It's been a very, very long weekend for me. Did a presentation today in the Andy's Knowledge Cafe. Today I dealt with African American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. Yesterday it was the distortion of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the revolutionary, would not be televised on the television. You can order both of those presentations from our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you did not make it out yesterday, we know tomorrow is Dr. King Day. All right? So, we'll go to the phone lines in just a minute here, so stand by, Quentin. Okay, so before the break, I was sharing some more of this article here from the Washington Post, and we're talking about Trump's comments. Sharing this article from the Washington Post. This deals with how Asian Americans became the model minority. It's from November 19th, 2016. The real secret to Asian American success was not education. The real secret to Asian American success was not education. And in a 2014 editorial, Bill O'Reilly, the former host of the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News, pointed out that Asian household incomes were 20% higher than white household incomes on average. And he said, so do we have Asian privilege in America, end quote. Of course not. He said that the real reason that Asians are succeeding far more than African Americans and even more than white Americans is that their families are intact and education is paramount. But actually, when we look at the actual history of what happened, we find that's not the reason. Okay, so if we pick up, if we continue where we left off here in this article, at the time of the 1940 census, economist Nathaniel Hilger from Brown University found that California-born Asian men earned less than California-born African American men. That's the 1940 census. But by the 1970 census, Asian men were earning about the same as white men, and by the 1980 census, the native-born Asian men were out-earning white men. So what happened? How did that take place? Was it affirmative action policies? What happened? So throughout this time, many Asian American families did invest increasingly in their children's education. But economist Nathaniel Hilger from Brown University discovered that the improvements in educational attainment were too modest to explain how Asians' earnings grew so fast. The picture became much clearer when he compared people with similar levels of education. Economist Nathaniel Hilger found that in the 1940s, Asian men were paid less than white men with the same amount of schooling. But by the 1980s, that gap had mostly disappeared. He said Asians used to be paid like blacks, but between 1940 and 1970, they started to get paid like whites. Now, there's a chart here in the article that shows average earnings for native-born African American, white, and Asians, depending on how much education they had. Okay, Now, in 1980, for instance, they give the example, even Asian high school dropouts were earning about as much as a white high school dropout and vastly more than African American dropouts. This dramatic shift had nothing to do with Asians accruing more education. Instead, economist Nathaniel Hilger from Brown University points to the slow dismantling of discriminatory institutions after World War II and the softening of racial prejudices. That's the same explanation advanced by economist Harriet Orcutt Duleep, D-U-L-E-E-P, and Seth Sanders, who found that in the second half of the 20th century, Asian Americans not only started to work in more lucrative industries, but also started to get paid more for the same kind of work. In other words, the remarkable upward mobility of California-born Asians wasn't about superior schooling, not yet anyway. It was the result of Asians finally receiving better opportunities, finally earning equal pay for equal skills and equal work. America became less racist towards Asians. This is what happened. Okay? So why couldn't African Americans close the wage gap? It's hard to say. Economist Nathaniel Hilger found some evidence that there were underlying differences in skill between Asians and African Americans with the same amount of schooling. African Americans tended to achieve lower scores on military enlistment tests during the 1940s. But it's also likely that post-war racial attitudes shifted differently for Asians than they did for African Americans. In the 1850s, so this is during slavery, 1850s, newspapers in California complained that Chinese immigrants were the dregs, D-R-E-G-S, of the laboring class, having, quote, most of the vices and few of the virtues of the African. Most of the vices and few of the virtues of the African, end quote. Yet by the 1960s, attitudes had completely flipped. Journalists praised Asians for being hard workers who cherished education, kept their heads down, and rarely complained. Quote, still being taught in Chinatown is the old idea that people should depend on their own efforts, not a welfare check, in order to reach America's promised land, end quote, the 1966 U.S. News and World Report article said. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Quentin, line 1. Thanks for holding, Quentin. Welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from.
Detroit.
Okay, go ahead, man.
Yes. Mitch Albom has operated the Have Faith Haiti Mission Orphanage in Port-au-Prince since 2010.
Mitch Albom, the writer here in Detroit. Mitch Albom. Okay, go ahead.
In his article today on page 24A, he says that Haiti was the first black republic in this hemisphere, that its slaves were free before ours, that we didn't want to deal with it for years because of that.
Right.
We sent the Marines in to take the gold out of Haiti's reserve. And it brought it to the United States. We occupied and ruled Haiti for 19 years.
Right.
And we had an effect on the coups and the dictators there.
Right. Right. It's like when they took out Aristide. When they took out Aristide in Haiti also. Yep.
Right.
Now, is that Free Press or News? Is that Free Press or News? Which one is that? That's Free Press. Free Press.
Yeah, it's only one paper on Sunday.
Yeah. So Freep, well, I get it online, but Freep.com. So everybody knows who's listening. Freep. Freep.com is the official website of the Detroit Free Press. If you go there right now, you'll see the article "Album Trump's Words on Haiti Embarrass something," but it's right there. Go ahead.
Right. I'm finished, brother. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks for calling, man. Thanks for sharing that with us. So, the name of the article that Quentin was referencing by Mitch Albom, Detroit Free Press columnist, is called "Dear Haitian Orphans, Don't Judge Us for President Trump's Words." Dear Haitian Orphans, Don't judge us for President Trump's words. Okay, so you can check that out, freep.org. Okay. All right, let's go to Bay Reed, line 2. Hey, Bay Reed, welcome to the African History Network show. How you doing?
John, how you doing? First of all, Brother Michael, Dr. Michael Imhotep,
yes, sir.
I have to give you the credit. I have to give you the credit of the world, my brother. You talking about all the other scholars. You are one in a million, my brother.
Oh, thanks.
I'd like to give my high five all the daughter over me and them, the daughter, know they had to face the church and him, and especially look after you and guide you and protect you. Islam, salam alaikum, my brother.
All right, walaikum salam.
Yes, sir. We was talking when you were speaking about the Moors, and the brother was he was putting it out there a little bit, and you was giving him much knowledge. Do you remember the brother used to come on channel 33 in Island Park, the Moors brother? Remember him, the older brother used to be on the
I'm not exactly sure which one. I know a few of them, but go ahead with your comment.
Okay, don't speak on. But anyway, that brother. You need to kind of touch bases back with him. The older brother had the goatee, the slim gray goatee. You need to touch back with him. Another thing, when you were speaking about being of on our own, I think Marcus Garvey, the movement of Marcus Garvey was headed in that direction, and that's why they deterred him and deflected him and intervened in his organization, because he was one of the only ones that let the oligarchs have them initiated or sign into their status, if you know what I mean, for us, you know, I don't want to speak on that because you're on a good topic and I don't want to change the subject from that. But Marcus Garvey was one of the only ones that didn't sign that. And if we learn and live and read a little bit about that, we'll learn a little bit more about history. Another thing, I would like, if it's not taken away from the topic, if you can, which one of the Moors, nation that was in sovereignty, and to maybe, if it's not too much, to give us a little understanding on that, so we'll know why and what we are under and what we're coming from, and what it shall be and could be if we're going to try to build by ourselves and for ourselves. And the other thing, do you think Noble Drew Ali and Master Farah Muhammad was they associated with one another? With that, and I'm going to leave the airways with that. It was a question for that reason why I said that, because we got to come together and be together.
Master Farah, I don't know if they were associated together. But, okay. All right, thanks for calling. All right, let's go to Kane, line 3. I think this is Kane. Is this Kane, line 3?
Yeah,
Kane. Hey, Kane. Where you calling? All right, where you calling from?
I'm calling from Bessemer, Alabama.
Oh, what's the name of the city?
Bessemer.
Bessemer, Alabama. Okay. All right, go ahead. Thanks for calling in.
Oh, man, I was calling in just to listen to you guys, man. I didn't think I was going to, you guys expect me to ask a question or anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so...
brother,
go ahead.
The last brother that was on, he asked an interesting question, but I think you just answered it. If Farah had any dealings with the Noble Drew Ali.
Yeah, I don't know for certain. I don't remember hearing anything about that. I don't know for certain on that. So somebody that is maybe the Nation of Islam, they may be able to answer that question or something like that. But okay.
Right.
All right, man. How'd you find out about the show tonight?
Well, I actually got an email. Oh,
I sent out the email. Okay. Okay.
Right. And I got the email, so I went ahead and called. I thought I called early. Because it said you could call at 9:10 that you guys are going to start.
Oh, you can call in like if you have questions. Yeah, you to listen to the show, man. You can either listen online. You can go to the website 910am Superstation.com. 910am Superstation.com. We have a link there in the email. You can watch it online, or you can download the 910am app to your smartphone from your Android store or Google Play Store. It's a free app. You can download that app. You can watch on your smartphone also. Okay, because this is live. This is regular radio. It's like regular radio. So it's that's the call-in number for people who have questions.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, man. All right. Thanks for calling. Keep listening. Okay. So check out that article from WashingtonPost.com. dealing with Asian Americans. The real secret to Asian American success was not education. So if we go back and look at Trump's comments from Thursday, January 11th, right? We check out the article, the story that broke the internet. Trump derides protections for immigrants from S-hole countries, written by Josh Dawsey. Okay, it goes on to say Trump then suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries such as Norway, whose prime minister he met with Wednesday. The president, according to the White House official, also suggested he would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries because he felt that they helped the United States economically. In addition, Trump singled out Haiti, telling lawmakers that immigrants from that country must be left out of any deal. These people said, quote, "Why do we need more Haitians?" Trump said, according to people familiar with the meeting, take them out. Now, what's interesting is that when asked about this on Thursday evening, the White House did not say, he did not make these comments. All right. Now, in November, the Trump administration rescinded deportation protection granted to nearly 60,000 Haitians after the 2010 earthquake and told them to return home by July 2019, even though Haiti is not equipped and in position to have them come back. Now, lawmakers were taken aback by these comments, according to people familiar with their reactions. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, and Senator Richard Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, had proposed cutting the visa lottery program by 50% and then prioritizing countries already in the system, a White House official said. Now, a White House spokesman defended Trump's position on immigration without directly addressing his remarks. Okay? Now, White House officials did not dispute the account. White House officials did not dispute the account. They didn't say, oh, he didn't say that. They didn't say, oh, what had happened was. They didn't dispute it. Now, spokesman Raj Shah, S-H-A-H, Raj Shah said in a statement issued after the Washington Post first reported Trump's remarks, he said, certain Washington politicians chose to fight for foreign countries, but President Trump will always fight for the American people. Like other nations that have merit-based immigration, President Trump is fighting for permanent solutions to make our country stronger by welcoming those who can contribute to our society, grow our economy, and assimilate into our great nation. Assimilate? Really? Assimilate. Now, he didn't deny these comments. Now, we know Trump built his candidacy and presidency around hard stances on immigration, vowing to build a wall along the Mexican border. And he said Mexico was going to pay for the wall. Now he's trying to get $18 billion from taxpayers to pay for this wall that he lied and said Mexico was going to pay for. He ran on a platform of cutting legal immigration by half and also among other positions as well. Now, officials at the Department of Homeland Security have increased immigration raids, like we saw on 7-Elevens, including dozens last week at convenience stores across the country. I wonder who they voted for. I wonder who their relatives voted for, right? Check out the rest of this article from Washington Post. This was the article that broke this story, okay? Now, you had some Republicans pushing back on this. So the article from New York Times, hopes dim for DACA deal as lawmakers battle over Trump's immigration remarks. This is from January 14th. Today, hopes dim, D-I-M, for DACA deal as lawmakers battle over Trump's immigration remarks. And you have, let's see, Senator Tom Cotton, who says he did not recall the president saying these comments specifically. You have Senator Lindsey Graham basically saying he did say them. You have Senator Dick Durbin saying he did say them. You have Senator David Perdue saying that President Trump, quote, did not use that word, end quote, and he accused other participants in the White House meeting, like Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, of a, quote, gross misrepresentation, end quote, of what the president had said at the session. But the White House did not deny that he didn't say this. Very, very interesting. You have some Republicans trying to push back on this. Now, what has come out because of this is, if we look at the Houston Chronicle, chron.com, CHRON, Houston Chronicle newspaper. We look at their website, chron.com. They have an article, data show Nigerians the most educated in the U.S. This is was updated, originally published back in 2008, but it was updated Friday, January 12, 2018. Bachelor's and beyond, bachelor's degrees and beyond. In America, Nigerians' education pursuit is above the rest, whether driven by immigration or family. Data show more earned degrees. And they talk about how Nigerian immigrants have the highest level of education in this city and nation. So they're talking about in Houston, Texas, I take it. Surpassing whites and Asians according to census data, bolstered by an analysis of 13 annual Houston area surveys conducted by Rice University. So you can check that out. Then Bloomberg, I came across an article from Bloomberg back in 2015. Okay, and this article from Bloomberg talks about how African immigrants are some of the highest educated people in the country. So the article from Bloomberg.com, it isn't just Asian immigrants who thrive in the U.S. Skilled foreign workers do well no matter where they're from. It isn't just Asian immigrants who thrive in the U.S. See, and Trump is operating based upon this myth, based upon these stereotypes, okay, that we laid out from the other article from the Washington Post. In a recent column in the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof dared to ask the awkward question of why Asian Americans have been so economically successful in the U.S. The most important reason, he says, are hard work and a reverence for education. Okay, following along that myth once again. Okay, but Nicholas Kristof notes research showing that even when IQ scores are equally matched, East Asian kids tend to get ahead by working harder. He also cites experiments indicating the stereotype of high intelligence and strong academic potential may be self-fulfilling, a positive version of stereotype threat. Okay, but the article goes on to say, perhaps most surprising is that by many measures, the most educated immigrant group in the U.S. isn't East Asians, it's Africans. Somebody need to, can Pastor Darrell Scott and Bruce Lavelle and Christina Pearson, all these black Republicans that are always around Trump, they need to get him this message. According to census data, more than 43% of Asian immigrants hold a bachelor's degree or higher, slightly more than immigrants from East Asia. So the data does not correspond to the stereotype. Okay? The most educated immigrant group in the U.S. are not East Asians, it's Africans. The same Africans who come from S-holes like Trump said they came from. So then you have the African nations asking for clarification, and they're asking the U.S. ambassadors to those nations, wait a second, are you talking about our nation? Botswana sent a message to the White House asking for clarification, African nation of Botswana. Nigerian immigrants are especially educated, with almost 2/3 holding college degrees, a significantly higher percentage, even higher than Chinese or South Korean immigrants. So Trump is open to letting Asians come to the U.S. because they help the U.S. state economically, but Nigerians have a higher educational level than Chinese. According to census data, U.S. census data, right? Not census data from Nigeria. According to U.S. census data, more than 43% of African immigrants hold a bachelor's degree or higher, slightly more than immigrants from East Asia. Nigerian immigrants are especially educated, with almost 2/3 holding college degrees, a significantly higher percentage, even higher than Chinese or South Korean immigrants. African immigrants are also very likely to hold advanced degrees, many of which are earned at U.S. universities. By many measures, African immigrants are as far ahead of American whites in the educational achievement as whites are ahead of African Americans. Let me repeat this. By many measures, African immigrants are as far ahead of American whites in the educational achievement as whites are ahead of African Americans. That education translates into higher household income. Nigerian Americans, for instance, have a median household income well above the American average and above the average of many white and Asian groups, such as those of Dutch or Korean descent. Bloomberg.com. Read this article. Share this with your Republican friends.
Hello?
It isn't just Asian immigrants who thrive in the U.S. Bloomberg.com, October 13, 2015. Let's go back to the phone lines. Let's go to Tony, line 1. Tony, welcome to the African History Network show. How you doing?
Hi, Michael. Good to talk to you again. I appreciate you being on last week. It was great.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, we distribute the pain.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Oh, my God. But, yeah, Trump thinks Nigerians won't go back to their huts. They have mansions. He's an idiot.
Absolutely. He's an idiot, but see, he's worse than the average idiot because he is actually involved in making policy. He can write executive orders. He's involved in crafting policy that impact us. So he's more dangerous than the average idiot.
Oh, my God. Wayne, why do you think black Republicans try to defend the indefensible? I mean,
because they're getting paid to do so, and they're getting paid to do so. They have no self-respect. They have a very little opinion of people that look like them, of African Americans, and they're getting paid to do so. This is why.
Do you think it's ignorance or miseducation, Wayne?
This is not Wayne. This is Michael.
Oh, Michael, I'm sorry.
Ignorance or miseducation?
Imhotep.
It's both. They've been miseducated, therefore they're ignorant. It's both. It's ignorance and miseducation. It's both. Go ahead.
I said Wayne because he was the one trying to defend number 45, and
well, let's not mention the brain dead on my show. I don't even want to deal with that. Yeah,
okay,
you can defend them. Yeah, wait till your wake up call comes. Another one. Yeah, okay. See the quick. See.
45 supporters are like in soup lines.
Right. Now, what black Republicans should ask themselves, and I asked this question a few weeks ago. I asked this question before the holiday break. Right? The question that these black Republicans should ask themselves is, what happens to you when you have outlived your usefulness to white supremacy? What happens to you? What happens to you when you? Yeah. What happens to you when you have outlived your usefulness to white supremacy and you are no longer of value to them? You're gonna be outside the White House like Omarosa. That's what happens, and we don't want you back because you have been exposed as traitors to your people. Now that's the question you should ask yourself: Is the money that they're paying you worth being ostracized and being exposed as a traitor? Because they don't have respect for you, and we don't have respect for you. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm saying, okay, and then what do we do when they come back and talk about my community and my people?
Close the door on them. Put them out like Omarosa outside the White House, trying to get back in. Don't invite them to the cookout. Don't invite them to the parties.
No, they
Don't invite the ostracize them. Don't invite them to the family reunion. Ostracize them until you apologize and ask forgiveness and tell us what you did wrong. Don't no. We ain't got nothing. Nope. Just like Angela Rye clowned Omarosa on CNN. She said, "Bye, girl. Bye, Felicia." You know, just like Robin Roberts said, "Bye, Felicia" to Omarosa on Good Morning America. No. Nope.
No, that's betrayal by any other name.
Absolutely. So this is the question they should ask themselves, because your wake-up call is coming. All of them: Bruce Lavelle, Pastor Daryl Scott, Pastor Mark Burns, all of them. Your day is coming. Okay. All right. We got to run. We got to coming up on commercial break. All right. We'll be all right. Thanks for calling, Tony. We'll get these other calls when we come back. Jack and Bruce and Wilson stand by. Calling number 313-778-7600. Listen to the African History Network show, 910 AM, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We're live. It is Sunday, January 14th, 2018. And hey, if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, we know African American History Month is coming up, or any other presentations. I have a presentation dealing with the history of African American History Month while we celebrate it. I have a lot of information. Email me at info at africanhistorynetwork.com. Info at africanhistorynetwork.com. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, we know anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X is coming up, February 21st. We know that the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King is coming up, April 4th as well. And African American History Month is coming up also. You can also call me, 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003 as well, if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization. Okay, so let's see here. And also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can email me through the website, and all of my DVD lectures are there. If you want to order those to help support the African History Network, you can read my articles that I write. We have video clips, audio podcasts of our shows. There are almost 800 audio podcasts as well. Okay, quickly, let's go to the phone lines because I have to get through these other topics. So let's go with Jack, line 2. Hey, Jack, welcome to the African History Network show. How you doing?
Hello, Michael. Oh, I just love your show. I've been following you for quite a while.
Hey, man, thanks.
And I'm going to be contacting your office and trying to get you to come out and have a presentation at our group. I'm connected with NAN Man. I'm the founder and ex-president of NAN of Inkster.
Okay. What is NAN of Inkster? Is that National Action Network of Inkster?
National Action Network.
Oh yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, contact me.
Give me the proper spelling of your last name.
Imhotep. 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 Yeah, Imhotep.
H-O-T-E.
T-E-P, yeah, Imhotep. I-M-H-O-T-E-P.
Okay. And I'll be getting back with you.
That's fine.
I'll have my secretary to call you back.
Okay.
I mean, Nan's secretary to call you back. And this is for one day in African American History Month.
That's fine.
And, oh, man. You just mean so much to me. I've been following you for a while.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it.
And I love your show, and just keep up the good work. That's all I can say.
All right, man. No problem, Jack. Happy New Year, okay?
Same to you.
All right, keep listening. All right, let's go to Bruce, line 3. Hey, Bruce, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from.
Detroit. How you doing, Mike? I was Nandy today. I had to ask you about the gerrymandering, but what I was calling tonight is because when you mentioned the comparison between the Asians and the Nigerians, and we leaped over every hurdle and exceeded all of their expectations
do you think the bottom line is that they're actually afraid of that melanin? Because a black man can make a black baby, not only with a black woman, but he can also make a black baby with a white woman, and given things that's equal economically. You see how easy it is, and I don't know why athletes can get, or white women pursue black men when they can find that economic security. And so that being said, if that would be like Martin Luther King's dream would come true, black boys and white girls and all of that, who would inherit the ranch? People that look like Obama and Halle Berry. So do you think they really fear our melanin, and it has nothing to do with education and all of that?
Well, there's a fear of the melanin, but the fear of the history in this country of African Americans is different than the history of Nigerians. And what I mean by that is, if you go back to April 3rd, 1964, when Malcolm X gave his speech in Cleveland, Ohio, about the ballot or the bullet, okay? He talks about in that speech, and I referenced that speech in one of my articles, but if you get a transcript of that speech from April 3rd, 1964, Malcolm says, do you notice that Africans from Africa immigrating to this country don't need a Civil Rights Act? They don't need a Voting Rights Act. They come here with all their rights intact, okay? And he talks about how, I think it was in that speech, he gave the example of an African that goes into somewhere, an establishment in the South, and it says, no colors allowed or what have you, but they're able to get service, right? Because even though we know slavery took place on the continent of Africa, and we know Nigerians were taken out of Africa and enslaved in various countries and brought here, when you look at immigration and you look at how the U.S. perceives Nigerians coming here, the stain and taint of slavery largely is not associated with them like it's associated with us, because the enslavement of African people took place here, and many of us are descendants of that, have that ancestry, even though we may have also black Indian ancestry, we may have ancestry that goes back to indigenous people. The taint, the stain of the enslavement of African people in this land is largely associated with African Americans and not necessarily associated with Nigerians or other immigrants from other.
Because of that, did Nigerians come over here with a certain amount of sovereignty or a totally different mindset?
Well, largely African immigrants in general, not just Nigerians, largely African immigrants in general have, to a larger extent, their history and culture intact, their language, things like this, right? So that helped. They use that just like every other ethnic group. They use that to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. But the way other people perceive them, the taint of slavery, and along with slavery comes a inferiority that is projected onto those who are descendants of slaves, because these were people who were conquered, these were people who were enslaved, these were people who were chattel, these were people who were pieces of property. Okay, that bias and taint largely is not put on African immigrants.
Okay, or they don't buy into it. Is that the reason why they kind of disassociate themselves with African Americans? They may be coming over here thinking that they're a little cut above us.
Well, largely a lot of that has to do with the exportation, one, of negative images of African Americans exported out of the U.S., shown around the world, and influences the way people perceive us. And then also, and I'm told this, and I've read, in Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, Tony Browder deals with this. A lot of African immigrants are told coming here to stay away from African Americans and that we don't like them and things like this. The same people,
I heard that too.
Yeah, the same people who taught us to hate continental Africans taught continental Africans to hate us.
Okay, so they systematically drove a wedge between both.
Oh, absolutely.
You understand the imagery because, hey, if I was a Martian from outer space, when I came here, I would think the same way through European eyes as most people that come here think of us.
Right, and that goes back to the article I shared last week, and I think even maybe the week before, from Blavity.com and the Washington Post. New study finds news outlets promote false, negative portrayals of black families that don't match reality. And what the study finds is that also policies are being made based upon these distorted images of African Americans in the media. Okay.
So why do they fear us more if they know that we're basically handicapped because of our inferiority complexes and such?
Well, largely, one, you have the fearing of the ability of African people to genetically annihilate white people off the face of the earth, because you have that. Two, you have the a lot of people know the actual genius of African people. Three, the disdain that's built up, legacy of slavery, but also the manipulation of the images. You can go back and you can look at nursery rhymes and look at stories like 10 Little N-Word Boys and things like this. You look at how Little Black Sambo, poems and nursery rhymes and children's books. This builds a climate. You can look at movies like The Birth of a Nation from 1915. Right, that show the Ku Klux Klan. It shows the Ku Klux Klan as being the heroes of the movie. You look at how the media, shapes the way people think, feel, act, and behave. All right, so this is what you're dealing with in American society. Okay, man.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Okay, Bruce. Thanks for calling. Okay, let's get Wilson. Then we got to get to some of these other topics. Wilson, thanks for holding. Welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from.
Good evening, Mike. Calling from Detroit.
Okay, go ahead, man.
Just a few brief comments. I know you're running short on time. As it relates to Trump and his ignorance, I mean, by now no one should be surprised by what comes out of his mouth. I mean, it's a given that he's a compulsive, pathological liar, and he's ignorant. This guy's semi-illiterate at best.
Right.
So this tweet became the spells eighth grade words like little and aid, but the lies about the Africans, and in terms of not wanting them to come here, the best educated immigrants in this country are from sub-Saharan Africa. And
especially Nigeria.
Especially, and have been for years. It's nothing new, But with him, it's just an attempt to demean, for those of us who really know anything about our history, we know that. Another thing, the educational thing is the Republicans have always attacked education. They've been trying to eliminate it as a cabinet department for years because it's one of the few things that puts minorities on equal footing with white. But last comment, as it relates to these black Republicans, I've asked them, I want you to explain this to me. You're in the camp with Donald Trump, a racist, who's been sued on multiple occasions by the Justice Department for discriminating against African Americans in particular. You're in the camp
at least twice.
You're in the camp with Steve Bannon, who wrote an article for Vanity Fair that said, talking about Trayvon Martin, says every time you see him, every time a black is killed, he called him a mongoloid. He said every time one of these mongoloids is killed, I celebrate with a glass of wine. You're in the camp with David Duke, the ex-grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. You're in the camp with Robert Mercer, who bankrolled Breitbart, a white supremacist website. You're in the camp with the neo-Nazis who are down the street from the White House talking about hell Trump. I mean, and this is who you choose to go to war with. Obviously there's a disconnect with you. So I mean, they ought to be shunned. They ought to be marginalized, ostracized. By all means, I mean, to forgive is divine. So I don't have a problem with forgiving them, but I don't want you to ever be that close to me again. Thanks for the time, Mike.
Okay. All right, Wilson. Thanks for calling. All right, so he mentioned education, and I want to get to this article here, right? News1.com. We'll go back to the phone lines just a minute. News1.com, January 3rd, 2018. Education Department could soon open the school-to-prison pipeline on full blast. Conservative chatter predicts that a change is coming. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos held a meeting in December 2017 with educators to discuss a 2014 Obama-era directive that called on school officials to end the disproportionate discipline of students of color. Education Week reported. Let me report this. This deals with the school-to-prison pipeline. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos held a meeting in December 2017 with educators to discuss a 2014 Obama-era directive. This Obama-era directive called on school officials to end the disproportionate discipline of students of color. Now, who do you think this benefits the most? Most likely African-American students, right? Now, there's now some chatter among Trump conservatives that Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos is planning to revoke President Barack Obama's guidance document. That would remove federal pressure on school districts to turn off the school-to-prison pipeline. More than 40 school districts have committed to significant changes in their discipline policies through an Obama-era program called Rethink School Discipline. Rethink School Discipline. Former Education Secretary John King, under President Obama, told News One when he headed the department, he said, quote, he added that the administration was making progress, but recognized that, quote, there's a lot more work to do, end quote. Nationwide, African-American students are suspended at 3 times the rate of their white counterparts. Now, Obama's 2014 guidance notified school districts that the government could launch a civil rights investigation if their discipline rates were racially disproportionate. In many cases under review, school districts were punishing African American students more harshly for the same offense that white students committed. And often that punishment involved law enforcement. The oversight could soon come to an end. That oversight can soon come to an end, according to Breitbart News. You just mentioned Breitbart, right? Conservatives are making progress towards pressuring Betsy DeVos to revoke this Obama-era directive. And you think elections don't have consequences? They are systematically reversing policies President Obama put in place, and most people don't even know these policies existed. There have been over 100 policy reversals. Read this article. News1.com, Education Department could soon open the school-to-prison pipeline on full blast. Then we look at Michigan State University. TheRoot.com, Angela Helm at TheRoot.com is reporting that Michigan State University is going to receive $1.4 million, almost $1.5 million, to create a new online database that will allow people to navigate the records of millions of enslaved African people and their descendants, which is good news for historians and African Americans who are interested in knowing more about their ancestry. Now, Michigan State University recently announced a $1.47 million grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, which will facilitate the project. The project is called Enslaved, the People of the Historic Slave Trade. Enslaved, the People of the Historic Slave Trade. And it will, MSU Today had an article about this also. It will be an online hub that links data collections from multiple universities on slavery and enslaved people. According to MSU Today, by linking data collections from multiple universities, the website will allow people to search millions of pieces of slave data to identify enslaved individuals and their descendants from a central source. Users can also run analysis and enslaved populations and create maps, charts, and graphics. Okay, so check that out. Michigan State University as well. Okay. All right, now we know that Monday is Dr. King Day. Check out the article that I wrote. Why did Dr. King tell us to redistribute the pain, understanding the power of economic withdrawal? Right? Why did Dr. King tell us to redistribute the pain, understanding the power of economic withdrawal? You can read all of my articles that I write at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We know on Friday, Trump signed the Dr. King proclamation, right? And Dr. King's nephew was there, Isaac Newton Ferris Jr., Okay? And he told CNN on Friday that while he does not believe that Trump is a racist in the traditional sense, quote unquote, he does think that Trump is racially ignorant and racially uninformed. Okay, the comments came a day after Trump in an Oval Office meeting about immigration referred to a series of nations as S-hole countries and questioned why the United States was not welcoming more people from Norway as opposed to Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries. Isaac Newton Ferris Jr. participated in a White House event honoring his uncle Dr. King on Friday and told CNN that Trump addressed the issue while in the Oval Office with Vice President Mike Pence and Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson before the ceremony. He said, I don't think President Trump is a racist in the traditional sense, and we know, as we know in this country, he said, I think Trump is racially ignorant and racially uninformed, but I don't think he's a racist in the traditional sense. All right, so what do you mean? He doesn't wear a hood? Is that what you're trying to say? He's worse than a racist in the traditional sense because he's actually writing policy. His policies impact millions of people. He's worse than say just a Bull Connor, or he's worse than just some white supremacist in Alabama trying to keep African Americans from being able to vote. Okay, how many fingers was that? Okay, all right. Now, thinkprogress.org had an article. So what you have to watch and what happened Friday with this signing of the proclamation, whatever it was, that Trump did. This is a perfect example of it. ThinkProgress.org has an article. Republicans praise Dr. King while plotting to dismantle his legacy. ThinkProgress.org. This is from January 2017. King was a crusader for racial justice and an economic radical. Republicans praise Dr. King while plotting to dismantle his legacy. It is a tradition every year in mid-January that officials determined to tear down the edifices of Dr. King that Dr. King built in a life, try to claim his mantle on Dr. King Day. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell from Kentucky praised Dr. King for reaching, quote, out to people of different backgrounds, races, and creeds, end quote, and imploring them to find the basic aspects of humanity that unite us all. President-elect Donald Trump, back at the time, President-elect, got an early start on King appropriation last August when he celebrated the 53rd anniversary of the March on Washington by calling upon today's leaders to work to ensure that all of our people can live in safety, prosperity, equality, and peace. This is before his S-hole comments. But these men have not honored Dr. King's life work. They threatened the voting rights King marched to secure, as well as rights such as health care and economic security that Dr. King cherished. They praise his legacy, then actively fight to dismantle it. Read this article from thinkprogress.org. There's a lot more. We just don't have time to get to it. Hey, thanks for listening to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. You listen to 910 AM the Superstation, the future of radio. We'll talk to you next week. Peace. All right, guys, we got to get out of here. Talk to y'all later. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, our website. My DVD presentations are there. We have articles, podcasts, everything. I have a recommended reading list of books, all that information there. Okay, talk to you later. Peace.